So how do we represent compounds? We use chemical formulas. We now understand that the reason compounds have constant composition is because they're composed of atoms in fixed ratios. When the law of constant composition was first observed, they didn't know about atoms. Now we recognize that the reason water is always 8-to-1 is because the number of oxygen atoms to hydrogen atoms is always the same. So we use chemical formulas and we indicate the elements that are present in the compound and the relative numbers of each. We use subscripts to indicate the numbers. And by convention, the subscript of 1 is omitted because chemists have a thing against the number 1. Common formulas for chemicals. Okay, so here's one we talked about, sodium chloride. This is the formula for sodium chloride. It has 1 sodium atom and 1 chlorine atom, a ratio of 1-to-1 in terms of their atoms. We don't put a subscript 1 after sodium or after the chlorine. I think, you think of it this way. Well, if there were 0, I wouldn't write Na, right? I wrote Na, and I didn't write another number. I didn't write 2 or 3, so figure it out. It's number 1. There's 1 of them. If there's more, I'll write more, right? It's like the old couple who'd been married for just like eons, and she was unhappy because he never told her that he loved her. And he says, well, what are you complaining about? I told you I loved you when we got married, and if it changes, I'll let you know. Right? So we don't write the number 1. That was just tangentially related.
So,
yes?
Excuse me, Ms. Mm-hmm. So all subscripts are going to be based on the ratio of the compound itself. So
right.
Carbon, so it
yeah.
just relates, the subscripts relates
right.
to the ratio.
And at this point in the class, it's going to appear very random to you. Why 1 sodium and 1 chlorine? Just because. Yeah, we'll understand a little bit later why, but for right now, it's just because. And so carbon dioxide has the formula CO2. Why? Because it does. But this is the formula, and what we're learning is, what does the formula mean? The formula means 1 carbon atom, 2 oxygen atoms. So this subscript 2 refers to the symbol right before it. So there's 1 carbon and 2 oxygen atoms in a molecule. And here's table sugar, C12H22O11. That's a lot bigger, isn't it? This says there's 12 carbon atoms, 22 hydrogen atoms, and 11 oxygen atoms. And those are the ratios of atoms of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Okay? Don't make this harder. It is just as straightforward as it appears. So the subscripts are part of the compound's definition. If you change the subscript, it's not the same formula anymore. So here's an example. There are 2 different compounds that form between carbon and oxygen. This is carbon monoxide, which is an air pollutant, and if your gas appliance is not properly maintained, you can get carbon monoxide inside your house and it can kill you. And sadly, every year people die of carbon monoxide poisoning. Bad stuff. Carbon dioxide, what's the difference here? This is a ratio of 1 carbon to 1 oxygen. This is a ratio of 1 carbon to 2 oxygens. This is a different compound. It's got different properties. Carbon dioxide is not toxic. Now, can you breathe pure carbon dioxide? No. But carbon dioxide in the air is not going to kill you, like carbon monoxide does. Okay, so it's a relatively harmless byproduct of your metabolism. You breathe in oxygen, you breathe out carbon dioxide. And the difference is this little number. So here's where details, again, are really, really important. Usually we list the most metallic elements first. Why does the carbon come first and then the oxygen? Well, one's not a metal. We can look at an example that has a metal. That's the sodium chloride. We're going to list the sodium first because it's the metal, and then the chlorine. not Cl and A. Why? Convention. Okay, I think of the metals as being masculine. I don't know if I've told you this. I told a different class. Metals are masculine, non-metals are feminine. So if you're addressing a formal invitation to a couple, is it Mr. and Mrs. or Mrs. and Mr.? It's always Mr. and Mrs. Why? Because that's the way you do it, right? Why is the metal first? Because that's how you do it. How do you remember that? Well, Mrs. K said that metals were masculine. The guy comes first in the address. Okay, so there you go. What if we have two nonmetals? Then what do? Well, let's look at the periodic table. Okay, so here, these are the metals on the left side and the nonmetals on the right side. Let's look at nitrogen and oxygen. Which one is closer to the metal side? The nitrogen, so we'll put the nitrogen first. Okay? So the one that's closer to being a man. Okay, we'll put that one first. All analogies break down at some point. Specific ordering is shown in this table. I tell you about this more just for those of you who are curious. We're not going to get hung up, and I'm not going to try to trick you with the ordering of them. But generally speaking, the more metallic one goes first. There's a few exceptions. The hydroxide ion, the oxygen always goes first, and that doesn't follow this pattern, but we're not going to get hung up on that. Example, and I think we'll finish up with this one. Write a chemical formula for each compound. So, a compound containing 2 silver atoms to every sulfur atom. Well, we've got 2 elements here, silver and sulfur. We need their element symbols. What's the symbol for silver? Not Fe. Ag. That's good. You knew it wasn't Si. It was one of the funny ones, right? We've got silver and we've got sulfur. Which one do we want to list first? Silver, because silver's a metal, right? Silver's a metal. The guy goes first, and the sulfur will come next. So we've got silver, Ag, and we've got sulfur, which is S. The numbers, 2 silver atoms. So we want to put a subscript 2 after the symbol for sulfur. For every sulfur atom. So there's only 1 sulfur. We're not going to write the number 1 because we're lazy. We don't have to write 1, so we're not going to. Any questions about that one? Compound containing 2 nitrogen atoms to every oxygen. Well, let's figure out which one goes first. We got 2 nitrogen and oxygen. They're both nonmetals, but which one's closer to the metal side? The nitrogen. So let's put the nitrogen first. It has a symbol N, and it says 2 nitrogen atoms. So subscript 2 for every oxygen atom. So then we're going to put oxygen here. There's 1 oxygen. We're not going to write the number 1. How about the compound containing 2 iron atoms to every 3 oxygen atoms? We've got iron and oxygen. Iron is a metal, so we're going to put it first. Iron's got that funny symbol because its Latin name is ferrum. So Fe. How many iron atoms? 2, again, how boring. They all started with something 2. To every 3 oxygen atoms. So here's oxygen with a 3. Fe2O3.